Sit. Why you gotta be like this, Bobby? Attempting to appear naive, Bobby glanced up at me from the opposite side of the folding table. With his gold and diamond grill that he constantly wore and his spiked hair, it didn't really work. What do you mean, Missy Kelsey? I snorted and rolled my eyes. Cut the Charlie Chan crap, Bobby. Save it for the tourists. Bobby, who was raised in the Bronx, was only using his accent to trick visitors into believing he was from elsewhere. I raised the pair of jeans I was examining. I don't know, Kelsey, the shipment just kind of sucks this month, he said with a shrug, dropping the terrible accent. They must be piecing it together over there using 6-year-olds, or something. It's not useful to me. Yes, I am aware of it. I'm hoping for some really tourists, he said with a grimace. I assumed you had stopped doing that stuff. My alternatives are dwindling. Furthermore, this differs from 3-card Monte. Those large corporations are unaffected. It's unlikely that they will even notice. I was becoming rather skilled at defending my actions to myself. A good pair of running shoes is pretty much standard for anyone dealing 3-card Monte on the street, but the only reason I'd gotten away was because they didn't realize a woman as small as me could bounce off a dumpster and clear a 10-foot fence. There are advantages to spending a few years as a circus clown. Learning all the acrobatics really paid off at the time. I'd sworn off my desperate life of crime and had felt pretty good about it. That whole need-to-eat thing was a serious drag on my morals. You're an adult, he said, sighing and placing another stack of imitation Gucci jeans on the table. You make the decision. Here's some decent Versace that I acquired. I need to make some money on the resale. Next month, I have to pay the entire rent. Because of the poor resale value, Versace won't do it. Not able to locate a roommate. It was a guy who disregarded the advertisements women only notice, thinking I would arrive with the flat, 2 smokers, and a dog owner. I had an equally severe no rats policy as far as the person was concerned, and the apartment complex had a tightly enforced no smoking, no pets policy. That is awful. However, let me know if you do decide to start exchanging favors for a place to stay so I can arrange accommodations. With a playful sneer, he lifted one eyebrow. Yes, please let me know what Anna has to say about that. Sport of spoiling. She would throw me out and keep you. I have some excellent Chakra House jeans here, he said, opening a second box. Both of crystal. The resale value on the genuine thing was pretty damn good, from $600 and $1,000 a pair, according to the websites of resale shops that I examined on my phone. That could work. Allow me to view them. After he handed me the stack, I carefully examined each pair in an attempt to find the perfect pair. Perfect didn't have to be the goal, until I spotted a size 4 pair of the rhinestone-studded jeans that look right. They did a good job with these. The real thing has Swarovski crystals, he agreed. If you could go into a size 2, that would be ideal. You seem a touch slim, he said, leaning back and examining me for a while. The weather is awful. I'm not adept at pulling tips in this garbage. Things are going well today. The last month had been nothing but rainstorms, he thought as he looked up at the sky. I am aware. Mom, I'm going to Times Square this afternoon. My annoyance briefly came through. Sorry, there's just a lot going on. Perhaps there will be a sizable turnout this evening. I assumed you worked the park and the Dumbo most of the time. Trying to get extra in somewhere. Times Square doesn't close, even though it's getting late. I shrugged. There aren't as many kids there, but perhaps my magic performance will draw in a few more. Anna gave me this to give to you, he said, reaching under the table to retrieve a large takeout bag. Lo mein, wonton soup, and frozen orange chicken from the restaurant. She is concerned about you. We both looked at my rumbling stomach and said, I think my stomach agrees. Tell her that I'm grateful. We both knew what the price would be before we started, but there are certain things that just have to be done a specific way. We haggled over the price of the jeans coated in rhinestones, and one pair of Gucci's good enough for me to use on a switch sometime. Even if Anna and Bobby are my friends and sometimes my food rescuers, when you're buying food on the street, it's still Chinatown. After arriving at my place, I calculated that I would have enough time to paint after popping a little lo mein in my used microwave to calm my stomach. The microwave sat on the counter above 2 empty boxes in the room's corner, the last vestiges of Carol, who had managed to complete a deal in New Jersey before rushing out with a flurry of best wishes and apologies. Although we were never really friends, she had paid her rent on time and had her belongings organized, which is really all that anyone could ask for. The microwave was older than I was, so I wasn't entirely sure that using it wouldn't expose me to radiation, but beggars can't have it any other way. I put on my bodysuit, took out my makeup tray, switched on the mirror light, and sat down at my trashed and taped over vanity. It's time to sparkle up. Check for a clean, dry face. The white paint, which is a mixture of zinc oxide and olive oil, was applied all over my face, from the forehead to the collarbone. I patted it to even it out and then carefully removed it from just below the bottom lip and the corners of the mouth. I used the bottom of a small medicine bottle to mark the cheek circles and then applied the red there, making it look light pink over the white. Amateur clowns often make the mistake of making the mouth red all over, which tends to freak out little kids because all they see is a giant red kid eating mouth. Using a sock full of baby powder, I gently patted everything down, then used a soft man's shaving brush to set the makeup so it would last all day. After using spirit glue to secure the little nose cap that resembled a maraschino cherry, I double-checked everything. The nose cap was my lucky charm, which I always carried with me as a reminder of who I was and what I stood for. The false eyelashes and tiny highlights in black grease pencil that had been warmed up came last. These were soft curling lines that extended from the corner of the eye to the cheeks. Lastly, tiny spirit glue dots were used to hold the silver sequins at the ends of the tiny black line. Even though they are tiny, they catch the light and significantly alter the look. Sparkle was perfect, exaggerated enough to work, but soft and cute enough to make kids curious and friendly. I'd had to tone it all down a bit from the circus makeup I'd used before, because what works in the ring or from 100 feet away can be a little too much for people up close. I settled my light blue yak hair wig on and eyed myself critically for a moment. The muted makeup also warded off most of the clowns scare me stuff. While some people actually fear clowns, a lot more like to act like they do because it's a common meme these days. Fear of clowns is now seen as humorous and normal, thanks to Stephen King and John Wayne Gacy. Still, it's difficult for a grown man to act like he's afraid of a clown when her main appearance is overly cute. I changed my lines in Times Square too. There were women out there wearing weird stuff. Circus clowns don't make lewd jokes, ever, but given the audience I was heading for, I could crank up all the way to Marx Brothers' suggestiveness. I love the Marx Brothers. I didn't do silent clown most of the time, but Harpo was my model for a lot of the physical stuff. My clown gear wasn't Halloween costume stuff, it was professional gear for a full-time circus clown, and my clothes were put up on a freestanding rack. They never went inside a closet again after the one time I'd had a mouse bite a hole in a $600 outfit. A sigh went through my mind as I realized I had more clown costumes than regular clothes. I couldn't pawn the 4 costumes or the 3 expensive wigs for anything close to what they cost or were worth. I kept telling myself that I would eventually get back to a regular gig and would really need them, even though my convincing skills were eroding daily. I'd even caught myself thinking about just going in civilian clothes, just be a street magician, but that's not who I am. Gosh, I'm a clown. A very good one. Pulling on baggy polka-dot shin-length bloomer pants, a blue skirt, a frilly checkered blouse, and a striped vest combo, I began to load my pockets. First, my chickens, a set of 5 small rubber chickens that I'd stiffened and weighted so I could juggle them. Next, some giant lollipops, my joy buzzer, a set of bulb horns, and a few other gimmicks went into various other pockets. Last but not least, I hastily fashioned a half-dozen miniature balloon animals. Just in case there were any children at the square, if I succeed, I'll receive a $20 tip. If not, the balloons were inexpensive and made me feel better. I looked over my magic. Street magic is difficult because there are no extraneous stage effects, no distraction, and the mark can see almost everything. I chose to use 2 standard decks of cards because you can accomplish almost as much with them as with a Svengali deck, and you won't have to worry about an amateur magician pointing out that you used a cut or marked deck. I also grabbed some tissue paper in case I wanted to perform a real paper ball trick on the correct mark, and a real silver dollar for the 1-coin routine. Punchy taught me that misdirection and sleight of hand are the key to the best close-up magic. There are unspoken rules to magic. Gimmicks fail, kids never look away, and the real magic is in the presentation. I have a whole collection of gaff tricks, but I never really use them because it's just too easy to get caught out these days on YouTube. I took one last, long look at myself in the mirror before making my way to Times Square. Today was going to be fantastic. I was punching a mime in the mouth before I had been on the square for 5 minutes. Clowns and mimes are said to have a long-standing animosity toward one another, but I've never seen it happen. Every one of the ones I know got along just great. However, this mime was Boris, and he was a fool, a tip-stealing fool, to be exact. Boris was a formal school-trained mime from Russia, or possibly Belarus. I'd heard both at different times, so I couldn't be certain. Boris was a street busker in New York that had somehow wound up as a Russian National School of Theater mime. He had a reputation as a robber and played intricate tragedy when he might have made more tips with the invisible box or walking against the wind set pieces. He was convinced he was better than everyone else, and he might have been, but it was probably his fault. He made a rush at a $5 bill that had been dropped into my hat following a card trick, and the wind caught it when the bill landed with the corner just barely touching the pavement line. Just as he was straightening up, I raced over and hit him as hard as I could, taking the bill out of his hand as he staggered back because I wanted that money. Cease. Presently, I closed my eyes in silent meditation and glanced over my shoulder. Sparkle, that was a really smart move. I had punched him in front of 2 police officers. The larger police officer slid effortlessly between us. He was about the size of a skyscraper and obviously a serious weightlifter, so there was no way he could hurt Boris in any other way. Boris was screaming in what I imagined to be Russian at the officers and at me, wiping the blood from his lips and nose with one hand while pointing at me. The shorter cop moved to watch me while I raised my hands and took a long step back. When Boris attempted to push the large police officer, he was quickly thrown around, forced up against a structure, and placed in handcuffs. I remained motionless, as if it had taken the wind out of him. He'd obviously heard it too, but he'd ignored it. He was a pretty damn good-looking guy, so he'd probably heard a few drunken comments before. A group of middle-aged women, more than a couple of drinks into the evening, were looking over the big cop, almost drooling. I overheard one of them, a woman in a red dress, make a loud and somewhat carnivorous comment about his back. "Look, you're being held here until we figure this out rather than actually getting arrested." The huge cop replied in a tone that told me it was just another boring bureaucrat's day, even though it was a sad moment for you, as he turned to face me after giving Boris to his partner. I nodded, having done this long enough to know better than to provoke the cops. Casting a quick glance around, I thought it was unfortunate that people were merely pausing to watch the altercation. I wish I could have attracted a throng like that myself. Punchy had informed me that Saint Genesius was the patron saint of clowns, which is kind of strange, but he's also the patron saint of attorneys. Anyway, Genesius smiled at me, or at least I thought that was who it was. The huge cop said, "I have to search you," in the same bored tone as before, "just to make sure there are no weapons on you. If you comply, I won't cuff you." With a little prayer of gratitude, I turned to face the group of middle-aged women who had been observing him with such gratitude. I turned my head slowly and thoughtfully. Well, I raised my eyebrows as high as I could and fanned myself dramatically with my hand while fluttering my lashes. I looked up at him, then very slowly reached up and made a gesture of gently poking his huge bicep with one finger. Officer, you have to, if you have to. There's always that one person who can make everyone else laugh, and that someone is the woman in red." She laughed loudly, a brazen braying sound that sent a ripple of laughter through the audience. "Simply turn around and spread your legs a little wider than shoulder width." He was so preoccupied with the procedure that he completely overlooked the audience's response. "Of course it is. Thank you, dear God," I said, opening my lips to speak while wagging my eyebrows at the assembly. "I adore this dream so much." Perhaps turn isn't the correct word. Doing a ballet turn in large red clown shoes is a wonderful clown move, mixing exaggerated accuracy and elegance with the ludicrous can be breathtakingly amusing. I turned slowly and placed my hands on one of the security bollards. My flawlessly stoic police partner failed to see that I was facing the crowd. He simply shook his head. I gave him a quick backhand and gave the audience a broad smile. He saw. The throng let forth another burst of joy as the woman in red and her entourage burst into laughing. "Do you have anything on you I should know about?" the police officer asked, taking a quick look at the throng. "Sharp items, needles, or weapons?" I tried to portray a fake, wide-eyed innocence. "Not that I know of, officer. However, you should take your time and pay extremely close attention." All the crowd could do at that moment was pump up the volume a little bit, because they were laughing almost nonstop. Nevertheless, my police officer finally understood he was playing the straight man in this game, and he sighed. "Let's get this done. Looks like I might be headed to the Husagao, girls," I said, making a mournful expression at the cluster of women. It was time to prime the pump. Bail money. A 20 flew from one of their hands into my hat. "If you're doing this for the city, that's fine. But if you're doing it for me, go just a little bit slower," he said, running his hands up my legs as I let out a loud, breathless moan. The crowd went into overdrive after that. He looked over the rubber chickens and held them up without saying anything. That was the first thing he found. "Those are my emotional support animals," I shrugged. With every wisecrack or odd discovery, a rain of bills fell into the hat. Cards, plastic safety scissors, juggling balls, tissue paper, and my silver dollar were all discovered. Fluttering eyelashes and double entendres that kept the gathering in a giving mood. When he discovered the clutch of enormous lollipops, he couldn't resist feeding me more straight lines than were absolutely necessary. "Why on earth do you need 6 of these?" I smiled broadly as I glanced over my shoulder at him, then turned to face the crowd and gave them a slow wink and a fingertip tap. "My therapist has diagnosed me with fixing my mouth." "You overlooked a pocket. Are you serious?" "Yes. Where is it?" He sighed quietly and resignedly. "Hip right." I squirmed wildly, whispering to him, "Red handkerchief," as the crowd laughed. It's the classic clown joke. You can't possibly be unaware of what will happen if you tug on a clown's handkerchief unless you grew up under a rock in Antarctica. While I played it up and concentrated on the women who had led the money shower, he played along, gradually removing the chain of silk handkerchiefs. "That's right there. That's where." "Oh yes, that's correct. That's where." Nearly. The handkerchiefs abruptly stopped coming, and for a moment he halted, as I had pinned the end by pushing my hip against the bollard. I panted and gave a dramatic roll of my eyes. His arm went straight up with the end of the chain of handkerchiefs, revealing the red lace at the end, and I let it go loud. "Does anyone have a cigarette?" I asked, sighing dramatically as I crossed my eyes, stuck my tongue out of the corner of my mouth, and then collapsed into a classic boneless comic feint, ending on my back and grinning broadly while feigning to try to hold my beating heart in my chest with one hand. It was that amazing feeling I'd always loved. The crowd erupted in laughing louder than I had heard since the circus closed. I closed my eyes and simply let it all wash over me until it faded and the policeman nudged me. Then I let my eyes flutter open. "Hello." With a playful expression in his eyes, he cast a low glance at me and said, "Okay, you had your fun." He cast a sidelong glance toward the tip hat and made a tidy sum of money. With a helpless shrug, I raised my hand to allow him to assist me stand. Sorry, but there was no way I could pass that up. As people began to understand that the event was pretty much over, the audience was starting to thin out. With a small smile, he shook his head. Hell of a way to make a living. Me or you? I'm not the one searching clowns on a Friday night, you know. He laughed and said, both. A lovely, cozy, low laugh. His companion approached. Boris over there says he'll drop the assault charge if she forgets about his attempted misappropriation of funds. It didn't take me long to consider it. The amount of money in the hat was probably sufficient to cover rent. If I had to use it to post bail, I couldn't use it for rent or make a fine payment. That works for me. After exchanging nods, Dom and his companion strolled back to the location where Boris was waiting for them. Boris remained in handcuffs, indicating that Dom's companion was perhaps less daring than he was. Rather not do the paperwork on this one. You'd both get fined and I'd spend all evening doing paperwork over a $5 bill and a bruised nose. Thanks. I took up the tip hat and opened it to find more $20 notes than I had in several months. He gave a headshake. Let's not make a habit of this. I raised my eyebrows at him. Really? I was thinking you and me could do a matinee on Sunday. I don't think Boris would cooperate. I gave a shrug. We could get a stand and mime. Most people can't tell them apart anyway. I concluded, neatly packing my thoughts into rubber bands. A roar of thunder managed to cut through the sounds of people and cars, and I saw people staring up. It was obvious they were picking up the pace, so there was no use in attempting to make a few more bucks tonight. He turned and headed over to where his buddy was still speaking with Boris. I appreciate it, but I don't think so. Stay out of trouble. It was a good perspective, as the woman in red pointed out, and the man clearly didn't skip leg day. My props were nicely placed by him, so it was easy to pocket them all up again, excluding the line with the handkerchief. It took some time to properly pack, so I just balled it up and stuffed it into a bigger pocket. I counted $593.37 later at the apartment. I had never had a better take in a single day than that one. Not insane enough to sell the house and go to Monaco, but holy crap, instead of making this whole thing up, I should have really attempted to get the big cop on board. Before putting the fake jeans on, I gave them one last inspection. As long as I was careful, I could replace them with the actual thing, and they looked nice. It was not the most dangerous swindle. All I had to do was wear them into the fancy store, exchange them for actual shoes, and go. After using the jeans for a short while, I would take them to a posh consignment store and profit at least $600. I was so desperate that it overcame my small sense of shame. Insurance would cover the loss. I knew I was just making this up, presuming the shop hadn't sold the imitation anyhow. Furthermore, it's likely that the same little child in Malaysia made both pairs. With the jeans tagged for well over $2,000, it was legally grand larceny, but any attorney, including the public defense, could argue that it was only petty larceny if I got caught. For a first-time transgression, anyhow. I continued convincing myself that even though it was against the law and akin to theft, it didn't directly harm anyone and prevented me from engaging in riskier activities like three-card poker or, even worse, falling for the more repulsive scams. Simply put, I wasn't prepared to pull pigeon drops on elderly women just yet. What are the main drawbacks of participating in higher-end events? Well, there were other reasons why I didn't enjoy doing it. You could be killed by the large cons as well, not just the marks. Men with confidence tend to be less violent overall, but everything has a cost. In a desperate attempt to save face, I had appeared as an extra in a few films, but it was a bad decision. There was a rumor that some of the low-level participants, or extras, had vanished from a few high-end cons, much to the dismay of the police. It was not my dream to be tossed into a landfill in a garbage bag. After years of playing that game, Punchy, our former boss clown, and his spouse Lulabelle decided to pursue a new career as clowns after Punchy's nickel upstate and a few near misses with some heavyweights. They had never felt bad about quitting the con game. Lulabelle was medically unable to have children of her own, but she and he had always loved kids. Thus, they discovered a location where they could have as many children as they want. Lulabelle cried the hardest I had ever seen when the circus failed, and it had nothing to do with money. However, they had recounted tales. When you travel, you pass the time by doing a lot of that. And he and Lulabelle had taught me what they could, what I needed to know to survive, after the circus had crashed. Even though I knew they were secretly worried about me and wished I could find better options. They had never passed judgment on me and simply wanted me to be okay. A few weeks prior, I had inspected Silver along with a dozen other upscale stores. Security tags are not used at certain establishments since doing so offends their absurdly affluent clientele. The customer support staff's keen eyes are constantly drawn to the exceedingly costly purses priced at $50,000 and above rather than the inexpensive blue jeans that cost only $2,000. Silver was no different. A shop with merely a silver slash through a black background, and not even a name above it. You are aware if you are. That was essentially Silver's approach to marketing. They were dependent on the very wealthy rather than tourists. I looked at my cosmetics. This time, no clown makeup. The finest cosmetics available to me. Salespeople are able to tell. Naturally, I also lacked the funds to purchase the makeup. Mine came from the housekeeping crew of a hotel. Not only do people take towels, they also frequently leave things behind. Wealthy women purchase a ton of cosmetics, which they eventually discard. Not all of it travels well. Some of it can be difficult to get through airport security. Furthermore, the multimillionaire's trophy wife doesn't care that her employees spend another $1,000 on concealer or eyeshadow. All you need to do is be amiable and know who to contact on the housekeeping team. I owned a makeup set that, if I had to have purchased it at retail, would have cost 20 grand. It was a bit different with perfume. I had sample paper strips in plastic baggies. When I rubbed one on my skin, I seemed to be wearing an exquisite scent. Not too much that the salesgirls would notice and assume I was rich but slumming. I learned all the angles of the switch and skip from Lule Bell, who had been doing it for years. My vintage t-shirt comes on. Of course, it was a knockoff of the Chinatown Vote for Pedro shirt, but like the jeans, it was good enough that, even if they saw through it, they would still think it was ironic, whatever that meant to them. The finishing touches included a tiny clutch pocketbook that was only able to conceal a bank card or two, a pair of eerily realistic-looking Fendi sunglasses, and imitation web-slide Gucci sandals. All of it was just passable to the salesgirls long enough for me to get what I wanted, but none of it was good enough for a point-blank scrutiny. The silver was the ideal location. The clothes the salesgirls wore cost more money than I could make in a good month. Nevertheless, they were accustomed to affluent patrons dressing however they pleased, leaving their platinum cards on the register, and leaving with purchases as big as mortgages packaged in tiny plastic bags. The attire perfectly captured the "I'm rich, but I'm pretending I don't care" vibe, and they hardly looked at me as I walked in. The key was in the little purse. I don't know why, but wealthy people shoplift. However, nothing fit in that purse, and they were too busy to worry about me staring at extremely expensive trousers when they had women rummaging through purses with enough money to buy an average house. At the Silver, salesgirls were paid on commission. I tried on a few pairs of jeans from Secret Circus while trying to look as disinterested as possible. I then casually focused my search on the Chakra House display. I nearly screamed out of frustration as I forced myself to breathe. Size 0 and 2 Chakra House Crystal Bolt blue jeans were available, along with one token size 8 pair. Not one in the two sizes I was able to use. I wouldn't be able to return anytime soon. I'd have to look for a totally different store. Salespeople are like ghosts. I found exactly what I was searching for on the counter next to the sleek black pulpit that concealed the obscenely obvious need for a register, while two of the salesgirls went to see to a customer. One size 4 pair of crystal bolts. The fact that they hadn't put it back on the shelf seemed strange, but the salesgirls couldn't be everywhere. It was over in a few leisurely minutes, the transition. I purposefully made myself take a little longer so that, should anyone notice, it wouldn't appear hurried. After transferring the tags, all I had to do was stroll over and place the knockoffs on display. A junior sales representative accidentally crossed my way while holding an upscale plastic purse that most likely cost over $20,000. "Excuse me." She hesitated, not wanting to actually upset me, just in case, but attempting to keep one eye on her possible commission across the store. "Yes." I let her off the hook by gently cutting her off after observing her attempt to choose between calling her Miss and Madam. "I came in to see if you have the new 7 for All Mankind jeans yet. I'm afraid they aren't due until next Monday." "Oh, I just knew I had the date wrong. Thank you." After explaining why I was in the store and not making a purchase, I slowly made my way down the street. "Be calm." I threw all of my mental energy on unwinding and remaining completely composed. I even stopped to peer through a few of windows. My legs felt so smooth and silky from the jeans. Damn, they were great. I considered keeping them for a brief time, but the selling price was equivalent to 1 month's rent plus perhaps a few of meals. Nevertheless, I knew they looked fantastic on my back. Naturally, half of a chandelier's worth of Swarovski crystals would adorn just about everything. After a few more blocks, I started to unwind. I had no place to go. Despite my current location, they would be unable to verify that I had taken anything since, unlike some purses, the jeans lacked a serial number. I just needed to wear them intermittently for a few weeks to give them that broken look and let any improbable police inquiries to fade. I noticed more rain clouds gathering on my way home, and I concluded that maybe I should just stay home and read for a change instead of attempting to go out and make some money. In addition, I had informed Punchy and Lulibelle that I would attend the street fair in their neighborhood the next day. I assumed it was a charitable endeavor. For me, it was just an opportunity to entertain some kids and take Sparkle out for a little fun rather than attempting to generate money for a change. Clown Lane. "Hey, Sparkle." I made the balloon poodle squeak down my arm to the toddler's hand when I had done tying it. She gave it a quick kiss and giggled before dancing off with it. "Punchy, you have any balloons left I can use? I'm just about out. I've run through over 100. He cast his gaze down the road. "I'm down to a couple, but everything is folding down now. He was clearly correct because the majority of the stands and tables had already collapsed. I got up and perched myself atop a stanchion. That's good, I'm about exhausted. I don't think I could do another handstand to save my life at this point. Punchy laughed and made sure his nose was securely in place. You getting by okay? I gave a shrug. Busking Times Square, the park, and the Dumbo. I have to seriously hustle to make rent and eat, but I've had a decent run of luck. Though it seemed like he was looking around idly, I knew him well enough to recognize his caution. You into anything? A little switch and skip. High-end blue jeans. Nothing serious. What I tell you about serious? I know. It's all serious to someone. Really though, they spend more on the air freshener every day than what I'm walking out with. You be careful, Kelsey. Rich people don't stay rich by being nice. I grimaced. Punchy called me Kelsey when we were acting, and I detested it. He was well aware that it was wrong. I know. I'm only doing it because my roommate moved out, and I had to make the whole rent. It's a slippery path. It really is. You know, I started as a ducky boy. Lulabelle was a ducky too. Got into a lot of fights. Duckies were like clowns. You pick on one and it's hey Rube and they're all there, you know. But it got ugly, we got older and we got out and tried to stay on the straight. Came up short on money a few times, started in the little cons. He breathed a sigh of relief and dug in into the dirt. Believe me, Rikers stinks. The next thing you know, you're in the bigs. And the stakes, well, they go up with the rewards. He exhaled sharply and shook his head. And me and Lulabelle were lucky. Guys we knew got popped. One we knew conned some guy's grandma. Only it was a Sicilian grandma. They never even found his head. Or his arms and legs. Another did a big job on a protected shop over in Irishtown. Vinegar Hill, back in the day. Punchy looked at me with a shiver. They took him to a metal shop. Let him live, but, you know, just to send a message to everyone else. I was nauseous for a while. I wasn't even sure if I believed me when I said, that was then, this is now. Nobody does that kind of thing anymore, Punchy. He stared at the ground for a while, a profound grief rising and falling in waves. Don't you believe it, Sparkle? People don't change, they just hide things better now, that's all. I think we did you wrong, teaching you the grift. Thought it was all history, like teaching someone to sword fight these days. Never thought you'd end up using it. I curled my mouth a little and said, I'm a big girl, Punchy. I'm playing it safe as I can. I'm barely doing anything right now. Winter coming in a couple of months, I'm a little worried about that. Follow the sun, Sparkle. Lulabelle and me are leaving soon, heading south. Maybe a month or two. Jibtown. The word Jibsonton, the colloquial term for the entire town of circus troopers, made him smile longingly. We haven't exactly ironed out the details. But who knows? We know some people there from the old days. Could be Jibtown, could be the Keys. He returned to the truth. What about you, Sparkle? What's your plan? I don't know. I keep hoping for a miracle. You think about Vegas. It's not right for me. I'm not cut out for it. He grinned, an actual smile, filled with pride. For a split second, I felt completely lost. He didn't wait for a response, saying, You're right. You're not cut out for Vegas. You know why? You're the real thing, Sparkle. A real honest-to-God clown. You don't give a damn about the money, you live on the laughter. I've seen you, you know, in the Dumbo. I watched you pass up a chance for a good hat to make a little kid smile. I made a concerted effort to maintain my composure, but I knew he was right. So I'm a terrible businesswoman, but an amazing clown, all the way to the bone. It'll happen for you, Sparkle. Just keep looking. Well, I'll be working Times Square again tomorrow, so it will have to come find me. He gave a nod. If it doesn't work out, I can get you set up with that agency in Vegas. Bones has some favors to repay me. It had been worth the time to come out, even if it was threatening to rain again, and I had a very good day, following a really good week. I was taking big enough hats that I was feeling more positive than I had in a while. Bobby Chan was standing back at the edge of the crowd around halfway through my set, and I almost blew my routine trying to figure out what he was looking for, but I was able to control myself. He wandered ahead and glanced at a store window as I finished up, gathering my belongings and counting my hat, which came to just over $200. What are you into, Kelsey? Nothing that you are unaware of. Why, Ivan is searching for you. They asked who knew you when they passed through Chinatown. I don't even know who that is. Ivan, big and little. Rumor has it that these strong-armed dudes are part of the Russian mafia. Are you waiting on them for whatever reason? This isn't 1950, nobody takes a cut on the square. I paused for a moment before continuing. I don't even know any Russians. My voice trailed off as realization dawned. Crap, this relates to Boris. I gave him a punch a few days back. Was Boris the mime you punched? That makes some sense. He smiled. But really, 5 spots and bloody noses over leg breakers. Who can say? One of them may be related to him. Bobby gave a shrug and froze, saying, crap, over by the corner. I looked and saw that 2 men, with pale skin and dark hair, one the size of a truck and the other shorter than me, were walking straight at us, both dressed in black dress shirts and jeans. Go, Bobby. I doubted they'd do much more than threaten me, but Bobby could at least avoid being seen with me. A clown could not possibly escape being spotted or blend into a crowd, especially in Times Square. Bobby appeared to have deduced the same thing as he walked away nonchalantly without casting another look. They had to know I was there, so I braced myself and watched as they approached, almost as if they were not even aware of my presence. My tensions were about to blow out when a massive shadow swept over me. They were probably no more than 10 feet away from me, searching the crowd, still strangely blind to me. How is today's crowd doing? I'm not sure how much of this was relief and how much was just a normal female reaction to an incredibly attractive physical specimen that smelled like cedar, but I felt me practically melt and run down into my huge red shoes. When I turned to face him, I'm sure I had the widest smile ever. He smiled down at me, and I saw the Ivans walking by behind him, seemingly unaware of me. Probably, but while it lasted, it would be enjoyable. It would, I'm sure, he laughed. I can guarantee that once you've been down with a clown, you wouldn't go running around, Ivan said, as I watched them carefully sweep the other side of the area. He laughed, deep and rumbling. I know how I laugh, and that was the laugh of a guy who knows how to have fun and appreciate life. Every female has a weakness, I thought to myself, and thank goodness for Greaseband. Otherwise, he would have seen me completely red-faced, uncontrollable. He hadn't said anything overt. I mean, I was wearing a clown suit, but there was something in his voice that made me think he'd love to see how much of me was blushing. He said it fondly, with a touch of something that I couldn't really get a grip on in words, but that my damn hormones percolated over. So, I kind of owe you for letting me get away with murder the other day, I said, looking down at his left hand, which was ringless. Is there any way I could buy you a hot dog? Rejecting the idea of being on duty. He smelled like a lumberjack, but in a pleasant manner, so I guess I should have shrugged it off. So, if you were off duty, when and where would I run into you? I might be at Elwood's Hot Dogs by the Botanical Gardens at 1 tomorrow, he said after giving me a brief period of study. I looked at him again immediately. Well, that's strange. Tomorrow is the garden's open space day, so I could be there too. Strange, eh? He laughed again, and I found his laugh very endearing. The recipient. By morning, I wasn't so sure about the whole hot dog at the Botanical Garden plan. After all, I didn't know the guy and I was generally wary of cops. But I had sent out the invitation and I was probably going to run into him again, so I figured it would be okay to have a hot dog in a public place. The strange thing was that he focused on me right away. People don't notice Kelsey the way they notice Sparkle, and he'd only seen me as Sparkle. I walked up to Elwood's right at 1 and saw him immediately. Not that it was difficult, given that he was about a head taller than anyone in the crowd. I stared as he grinned and said, "Civis today." I smiled up at him, putting aside my amazement. I'm not here to be seen. You see, that's how we intrude. Nothing the next day, then the next you're covered in clowns. Emergency clown gear, I said, pulling the nose cap out of my pocket and holding it up. It made my knees a little wobbly, and I kind of wished he wouldn't stop doing that. The world could use more clowns, he laughed again. My knees became very unstable. So, anyhow, what should I call you? Since Sparkle was the word on your placard, I guess I could just go with it since it fits you. Kelsey is my covert name. And you're invited, I'm buying. In a way, near enough, but not quite. We went for a stroll after I got us a few beverages and some foot-long hot dogs with all the fixings. It was the ideal low-key evening. You know, you never asked for my ID. Yeah, Boris is undocumented and there was no reason to turn a 5-minute thing into 4 hours of paperwork when he's just going to be released again anyway. So how'd you know it was me? He completed his food bite. After giving it some thought, he looked down at me and smiled somewhat. The way you move. It's toned down when you are in your civvies, but it's the same, in a way. You've got a kind of bounce. Reminds me of. You kind of talk like Groucho, but you move like Harpo. My goddamn knees almost gave out. Uncontrollably, I broke into a full Groucho walk, wriggling my eyebrows and holding my hot dog like a cigar. On safari this morning I shot an elephant in my pajamas. How he got in my pajamas, I'll never know. I felt that rumbling laugh again. It's like Sparkle the Clown is the real you and Kelsey is the costume. I almost swerved straight into him, but I was able to dodge it with a skip. That dude was throwing off my balance. We strolled around a good portion of the garden without discussing anything specific. Sort of. We both told each other we weren't really seeking for anything. He was relocating to San Diego in about a month, and I was seeking to get back on with a circus. Nevertheless, he seemed to enjoy my jokes, even the old and cheesy ones. I discovered that he was raised in Michigan, more precisely in the UP, which clarified why his accent was so unlike that of a New Yorker, even if it had smoothed down to seem like a flat Midwestern. It also clarified the aura of a rough-cut lumberjack that he exuded. The looks of jealousy I got from the women walking by was definitely fun. The time went by far more quickly than I had anticipated or had desired. I had asked him out so that I could be near a police officer during the Ivan's stay in the square, but it ended up being the most amazing date I had ever gone on. Upon arriving at the duck pond, I experienced a return to reality. Dom saw it right away. "Everything all right?" I said, staring into the lake, just thinking. "I know a guy who used to be a ducky boy." Dom nodded slowly, gazing down into the sea and saying, "Wow." He looked around, saying, "I've heard stories." "Well, they should be long gone by now," he shrugged. "They say there was never just one ducky. If you picked a fight with one, you fought them all. It gave them real power. Schools would close just on the rumor that they were coming. That's what he said. Dom cast a thoughtful glance around. You have to kind of respect that. They knew they could depend on each other. Returning to Easterbrook's, we strolled a bit more silently. Hey, would you be up to having dinner and a drink on Saturday? Maybe 8:30 so it doesn't affect your ability to make a living. Although it would have been simple to put him off, it would have been wise to do so because he wasn't the type of person to push too hard. Sure, where at? You know McKenna's near the precinct. The one with the bonfire sign. That's the one. Has good beer and a good crowd. Like a dumb bobblehead doll, I nodded. Sure, even though it was kind of worthless, I had a great time hanging out with him, so it may still be enjoyable. The following few days went by without incident. While working the park and the Dumbo, I had decent hats, not fantastic, but decent. Many children, which made my days easier every day. Punchy was correct about me. I've always had a special place in my heart for the children. 10 times better than a great hat with no kids in sight was an acceptable hat with a few smiling youngsters on it. That also happened on Saturday. To the great relief of the distraught mother, I was able to assist a young child in locating her mother. I went to the bar Dom had mentioned, not giving much thought because I was in a really good mood. Although I hadn't seen the Ivans, a fellow b-boy dancer told me he had seen them a few days prior. Though he hadn't spoken to them, he had heard whispers that they were trying to locate me. Poor Boris. I ought to have hit him with more force. Everything clicked into place the moment I walked into McKenna's tavern and glanced over the patrons. An Irish word for a pub. A mainly well-groomed, short-haired bunch. Not a man bun to be found. In the city of New York, close to a police station. If they had put up a neon badge over the bar, it would have been extremely obvious. I'm a sensible person, but the blue pants I was wearing were called Chakra Crystal Bolt. I entered a police pub while sporting blue jeans that I had stolen for $2,000. Before I could even start running, Dom noticed me. He screamed out to me, "Over here," from one of the rough-cut oak tables where he and the other two guys were seated. He got up to seat me and drew out the heavy oak chair. Making a hand toward the lanky guy opposite from him, he said, "This is Smitty and this guy is Dave." I smiled sweetly, but within down I was as scared as a cat thieving in a room full of German Shepherd police dogs. "I'm Kelsey." They both gave me a perplexed glance. Dom looked halfway between "I know something you don't know" and utter happiness. He gestured to the chair across from him. He waved toward the bar and said, "I ordered you the house special. Hope you like it." The waitress walked up brandishing a tray the size of a shield, arranging bowls and plates carefully in front of Dom and me after dumping enormous corned beef sandwiches in front of Smitty and Dave. Dom grinned widely. The waitress placed a pint in front of each of us and said, "I felt those muscles when I searched you. You don't have enough body fat to worry about a few carbs in a stew and brown bread and a nut brown ale." Dom gave the waitress a nod and said, "Thank you, Mary." She noticed my perplexity and grinned. I started to add my gratitude, but stopped when I noticed that her name tag said Jonna. It's been a tradition here for over 100 years. All the waitresses only answer to Mary. I smiled at Dom and said, "I think I'm gonna like this place." After taking 2 tastes of stew, 1 of bread, and a drink, I knew I was in love. He examined my dreamy expression. "What do you think? I may never leave here." That was clearly the correct response because I got very positive looks from Smitty and Dave. We emptied the plates and sat down with more beers after I ruined my meal, much to Dom's joy. Smitty gave me a condescending glance. "Dom's been entirely too smug and secretive about you, and you don't smell like a 9-to-5 worker. So it's your hustle." Dave gave a headshake. "Smitty's a detective, everything's a mystery to him." I could see Dom waiting anxiously to see me. Then he winked at me. All right, now it's your turn. I'm a busker, I work Times Square, the Dumbo, you know." Smitty gave a headshake. "I've never seen you there. What's your gig?" The waitress approached and observed with curiosity. "You're a detective, right? I'll give you 3 guesses. You move well, a lot of muscle on a small frame. Something physical." I raised an eyebrow and simply looked at him. "That's not a real guess." "A dancer. I do dance. I've had serious professional training and I can probably dance better than anyone you know." "What? No, not a dancer. Singer." I laughed heartily, only to drive off potential customers. "And bears, especially bears. Bears can eat you, you know." I gasped. Dom smiled. Not only was he loving this, but he was particularly taking pleasure in seeing me perform this. A wave of warmth shot through my entire body. The waitress thought, narrowing her gaze. Leaning back, Smitty glanced at Dom. "Give me a hint." Dom shook his head, saying, "I'm not sure that's fair." The server raised her hand. "House rules, if there's money involved, no help." I gave her a wink. I gave Smitty the broad, predatory smile that I would never offer in makeup and said, "There's no money on the table. Go ahead, give him a hand. Tell him one object you found on me when you searched me." He cast his gaze upward, reflecting. A silver dollar, one of the old ones. Low and slow over the plate, that was how Dom had delivered Smitty the clear one. And Smitty could tell by the triumphant expression on his face. The issue was that Dom was on my side and that Dom had offered him an alternative. A street magician. Nobody else would carry a silver dollar. I sat back, looking dejected. "Good guess. I do magic. I'm really, really good at it." He grinned. But, regrettably, no, and not a rabbit tugger. I reached under the table and tucked my red clown nose cap into my napkin. Okay, I give. Hold on. I firmly placed my nose cap behind my nose and pretended to wipe my mouth with the napkin. I leaned my left elbow against the table and rested my forehead in my left hand as I cast my eyes down to the table in front of me. It, coincidentally, prevented him from seeing my nose at all. So, let me think if there's some kind of hint I could give you. Dom burst out laughing. Smitty turned to face him. What? With my arm raised in that manner, the nose was visible to everyone to the side. Dave, Dom, the people at the next few tables, and Mary could all see it, but from Smitty's perspective, it would be very, very faint. The waitress began to giggle, Dave burst into a fit of laughter, and Dom's low chuckle turned into a full-blown giggle. Oh my, that chuckle was really funny. I just caught myself staring over at Dom and ruining the joke. I gestured to Smitty at the table in front of her. I don't know. Let's see. You know I can dance, right? I patted the table, and he looked down instinctively. The moment he looked down, I looked up, and before he could look up again, I dropped back. Tears were streaming from the eyes of the waitress who was supporting herself with the table. And you know I can't sing. Press. Take a look. Shut down. Dave was having trouble breathing. A couple seated across from us began to giggle after they had been observing and listening. I have a silver dollar. Press. Take a look. Shut down. 3 or 4 more tables joined in the laughs. Apparently, police noticed strange things. Who was aware? And I can do magic. Press. Take a look. Shut down. The waitress chimed in, clutching a nearby chair to catch herself on. She's really, really good at it. Smitty was staring around now, not at me, but he was clearly aware by now that something was wrong. Around us, snickers and laughter were steadily erupting from every table. I used the opportunity to wink slyly at the nearby tables, causing them to accelerate. I raised my head to meet his exact gaze, paused for maximum impact, and said, I'd think it would be as clear. I waited until he turned to face me again. As the nose on my face, he gave a disbelieving blink. How the hell? A great wave of laughter rolled about us. With difficulty, the waitress stood up and gestured toward the bartender. Charlie. He made himself look very formal and returned the call. Mary. She raised a hand above her head, pointing directly up at the ceiling that was lined with wooden beams. She patted my shoulder gently and said, I'm calling Mary's Grace. 1 round on the house, and this one. Eats and drinks for free tonight. Mary's Grace. Yells and thunderous applause broke out from the nearby tables. It all passed through me so quickly that I had to steady myself on the table. It was astonishing. But you can't lose the audience or come out as ungrateful. I got up, stepped onto my chair's seat, paused, and then stepped onto the chair's back. Even balancing on the back of the robust chair wasn't difficult. Dave began, but Dom did not extend his arm to grab or support the chair. He just thought that I was proficient in my work. I made 3 beautiful bows to the audience before sliding back into my chair to a round of enthusiastic applause. Of course, getting everyone to applaud enthusiastically is almost a given when you win them all free beer. Still, though, Smitty shook his head slowly. A clown. A real one. Some serious training to do that stuff. Circus. I gave a nod. Yeah, but I'm kind of stuck here for a while. Seriously, how the hell did you do the nose thing? Misdirection, mostly. Some sleight of hand. That was kind of a variation of the old paper ball trick. It works on the person it's aimed at. Everybody else can see exactly what's going on. Smitty gave a polite nod. That's what makes it so funny, right? He understood. It can come off as mean if you do it wrong or to the wrong person. You really have to gauge the audience. I could tell it would work here. Dave continued to laugh. Cops have a rough sense of humor that was perfect. Dom grabbed my hand and squeezed it. I did warn you guys. I told you that underestimating her would be a bad idea. He began to take his hand back, but I instinctively grabbed hold of it, squeezed, and then released it. I felt like my heart was about to burst like a rocket, but in a nice manner, from the laughing and applause. We were a little bit late. It was a blast, but I ate way too much and drank a bit too much Irish whiskey and beer. I have to be myself. With Mary's approval, I performed various magic tricks, jokes, and demonstrated a handstand on the back of a chair. Dom was fixed on me and never took his eyes off of me. Even while the number of people gathered around our small table was not as large as that of the circus, it nevertheless had a greater impact on me than a small amount of liquor or beer could have. I could feel the warmth of the laughter and applause seeping into my bones. I was nearly bouncing about with Dom's hand by the time we left. I gave him a quick glance. So, where do you live? He pointed, saying, about a block over that way. Good, because if I have to drag you back to my place, it'd take me a half hour and that would be a waste of time. When we arrived at his building, it appeared as though he was reconsidering. Look, Kelsey, are you sure? All individuals own a thing. It's something that excites them, something that propels them on. And I've been doing it all evening. Not that I was attempting to stop myself. I refused to let go, so much so that Dom had to temporarily press me up against the front door while he fumbled with his key card and punched us in. I was curled up against him when I woke up. It sounded like this wasn't just a passing rainstorm because I could hear heavy rain and the light was gloomy. I could be happy just here, so I hoped he didn't have to be in a place early. His one-bedroom flat seemed a lot nicer than the apartment I'd been sharing, but I hadn't exactly asked for the courteous tour. It was nothing special, of course, but everything about it spoke of a man who was between girlfriends rather than a perpetual bachelor. It was also clean and well arranged. I could see a little beer brewing experiment on a side table when I looked out the bedroom door. "You going to sneak out on me? Leave behind one giant red shoe?" I asked as I felt him stir and turned to see him staring at me. The legend. After his wondrous visit to the circus, poor Prince Charming wanders the kingdom, desperately trying to find his true love with that red shoe. I let out a sad sigh. 'Tis said to be the sad fate of those that love a clown too deeply. He laughed. The man laughed so very much. He looked about him. "So do I pass inspection?" I smiled and said, "We didn't trip over pizza boxes and empty beer bottles on the way in. I fought an all-out war with cockroaches the size of cars in my first place in the city. I don't ever want to do that again. Been there, done that." Dom moved a hand down my back. "For somebody so small, you're nothing but muscle. I have to stay in shape. It's easy to get hurt in a physical thing in the circus. So why did you become a clown? Is it a family thing?" I pulled myself in closer and gave it some thought. I'd spent most of my life using all the pre-prepared responses and smart jokes I knew. However, it was rather dim, and I felt comfortable and secure. I simply wasn't in the mood to use them. Not in his presence. I had a friend when I was growing up. Her name was Lisa. She lived down the street. We were the same age and we did everything together. We were the terrible twosome of 10th Street. Until about 5th grade. I stopped and tried to convince myself to continue. My comment: "There is no clear affair so far, but we will see the complete ending in part 2. Subscribe to catch the ending as soon as possible."